I got this far by believing in myself more than the people around me did.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_Beeble and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today we are looking back at Tuesday's games. 4 games in the NBA, some absolutely massive performances to talk about there as well. And then we look at 11 games for Wednesday. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Indeed. Let's start with the first game of the night. The Washington Wizards, they go down to the Hornets in Charlotte, 114-107. Let's start with Davis Bertans, who dropped in another 32 points with 8 triples and 9 rebounds, shooting 61% from the field. He is unbelievable at the moment. The 58th ranked player over the course of the season. In large part because of his threes, that is by far his best fantasy category. And he actually doesn't even have any other super strong ones, but being a 3-point volume guy, which at that volume, 4 threes a game, and not hurting your percentages, hitting free throws, scoring at a decent rate as well. He is putting up the monster numbers. At the 20th best player over the last 2 weeks, Bertans. He is a must-roster player across every single league. And while I can say the shooting might fall off, maybe it won't. He's at 47% from 3. He's hitting 51% of his 2s. Now, there is room for that to drop down, and he can still be an excellent shooter by being a 44% guy. And that will hurt his value, but he is a must-roster guy, and it's just not changing. Troy Brown Jr. was interesting in this one. 28 minutes, only 4 points, but 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. He missed all 4 of his field goal attempts, but they are some interesting type numbers. Getting assists from a small forward, the steals are nice. Isaac Bonga's not really doing much as a starter. Now, Brown is not a 12-team league ad. He's more of a 16-teamer, maybe a 14-team leaguer, but that is 2 strong games in a row, while Rui Hachimura had 18 and 12. A really typical Rui game, 18 and 12. Poor efficiency from the field. Actually, no, he's a better field goal shooter than that. If free throws struggled, no other peripherals, no threes. And despite the numbers, which look okay on the surface, 14.5 points, he still isn't a top 130 player. But in saying that, the last 2 weeks, where the minutes have skyrocketed, he's averaging 18 and 7.5. He is a top 100 guy, and he is a must-roster player across all leagues at this point, at least while the tank Tom Bryant is out. The other guy I thought would be a must-roster player, it's been pretty rough for Wagner. Now, only 26 minutes here. It looked a lot worse than that. Ian Mahinmi was killing him. He was absolutely dominating in the minutes that Mahinmi played, so they limited Wagner. It wasn't a foul trouble issue that kept his minutes down. Now, he did end with 9, 6, and 3 with a block, and the efficiency hasn't quite been there. He was a minus 18 overall, while Mahinmi was a plus 15, but Beal was a negative 36. Hachimura was a negative 30. Ish Smith was a negative 21. It wasn't like it was all Wagner's doing that saw the team lose this game. I'm giving Wagner a couple more games in a 12-team league because we've seen production from him all season. But Mahinmi is back, and I didn't expect him to be back at this point or even playing this well. And that is having a real impact on what Flaming Moe is doing at this stage. I am giving him a little bit of a reprieve for at least one more game. Brad Beal, strong buy low guy, 16 points in 37 minutes, 9 assists, because his shooting is so far off at the moment and people are frustrated, and you can probably snag him for like a 3rd or 4th round guy at this point given how the shooting struggles are apparent. Well, Ish Smith played a ton of minutes with Isaiah Thomas out, 13 points, 5 assists. He's okay at the back end of a 12-team roster, but it is far from a must-roster guy. On to the Hornets. Devonte Graham's ridiculousness continued. 29 points, 6 triples, 6 assists, 2 steals and a block. One of the biggest surprise stories of the season. And again, I did say in the offseason, I think he's a better point guard than Terry Rozier, or there's a chance he's going to be a better point guard than Terry Rozier this season. That's obviously true, but I didn't expect this. I didn't think the Hornets would actually do it, the Madmen, and go with him as the starter and play him this many minutes. Nor did I think that his shooting would become this nuclear as it has at times this year. Rozier was good in his own right. 17, 8, and 7. The field goal percentage still rough, but he's putting up numbers. While Cody Zeller had 14 and 10. It helps when you're playing against a team like the Wizards, and they had 6 blokes, the Hornets, score in double figures. Zeller is more a 14-team league guy, as is Bismack Biyombo, who had 13 and 8, 15. I was going to call him Big Mac Biyombo then. Paul Washington Jr. had 15 points. The shooting numbers were weird, only 39%. His 13 free throw attempts from last game diminished down to just 2 in this one. That was further highlighting that those free throw attempts were completely unrealistic. He's just a back-end 12-team league guy. It took him 40 minutes to get to this number, while Miles Bridges had 16, 2, and 3, had 2 blocks, but his efficiency was also pretty rough, and I still think that he is a 12-team league guy. Batum was out of the rotation last game, came back in, played 13 minutes, and then didn't finish the game due to hand discomfort. So that is one to watch. But of course, he is not really having any sort of fantasy value outside of the very, very deep leagues at the most, I guess. Let's move on to the next game. Push the wrong button there. All right, let's go. It is the Denver Nuggets and the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers get the win 97-92. Talked about Will Barton quite a bit lately. With Jamal Murray exiting this game after 5 minutes, Barton went crazy. 40 minutes, 26 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and he had a Richie Beno.
2 for 2.
A massive game from Barton. Now, I talked ad nauseum about how his hot shooting at the start of the season wouldn't continue. And then I also talked about how his recent cold streak wouldn't continue. He is just up and down, completely inconsistent. Go through his game logs from years and years and years past, just all his career. 29 points, 2 points. Like, he's just all over the place. He is a 12-team league guy. While Big Chungus Nikola Jokic still not as aggressive as we would want. 15, 7, and 11. That's not bad. While Paul Millsap, it appears that when they play the better teams, they're just going to get more minutes out of Millsap. 10 and 6 with 3 steals and 29 minutes. Still, I think he's more of a 14-team league guy. While Gary Harris, first time he's cracked double digits in the last 5 games. 14 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals. It did help that the Blue Arrow was out. I'm not looking to add Harris in 12-teamers. As for Murray, hopefully it's nothing too serious. They labelled it a trunk contusion, which is a really just objectively funny term to use. Ben Simmons did get him in the back with his knee. Maybe a game or 2 out for Murray. It doesn't appear like it's going to be anything serious. X-rays were negative, which is always good. We also had more of that nonsense backup wing confusion with Torrey Craig, Michael Porter Jr., Juancho Hernan-Gomez, and Malik Beasley all still competing for those minutes. Juancho was the one out of the rotation today. He did come in for just a minute, but it's so hard to get a full read on how those guys are going to work as we move forward. 31 minutes for Monty Morris was interesting, and 19 minutes for Jeremy Grant. Provided defense, but he is very much not a 12-team league guy. For the Sixers, Embiid had 22, 10 and 6, 2 steals and a block, good from him, while Toby Harris 27 and 4 with a steal and 2 blocks, also good. Let's talk about the painter, Matisse Thybulle. Joshie Richardson was back. He was on a minutes limit and only played 19 minutes. Thybulle had 13 and 5. But what has been interesting from him, he started out the season red hot on steals and blocks. He's still pretty good there, but what he has developed into is a strong shooter. Now, he was so far off on his shot at the start of the season that it wasn't even funny. But over the last 16 games, he's shooting like 57% from 3. His 2-point percentage is up to the level where it was at college. Now, I'm not saying that he is a 57% or 59% 3-point shooter, because he's not. But can he be a high 30s guy? His numbers in college are so weird to look at, because it's like great shooting season, bad shooting season, great shooting season, bad shooting season. And we've seen like horrible start to the year, really strong start, and it's going to level off at some point. But he's back in the rotation. He's getting these minutes ahead of Korkmaz, and his defensive ability, and if he adds shooting numbers, I think he's at a 14-team league guy at worst, available in 87% of Yahoo leagues at Thybulle, and I think we can look at him as maybe a 12-team adjacent type player. Horford had 11 and 9, but while Ben Simmons was bad, 7, 9, and 7. Not a good night from Simo at all. Didn't take shots, missed his free throws. Just really, really poor from Ben in this game. As for Richardson, you're not dropping him or anything after this game, but that's not encouraging. And the fact that Thybulle is playing that well, there's an element of risk there with Richardson. I was worried about Richo coming into this season. He's exceeded my expectations early on. Let's see how it all pans out as things do move forward for the rest of the year. The next game was a real interesting one. The Miami Heat get the victory in overtime by 14 points, 135-121 over the Atlanta Hawks. The Heat were up like 20-2, it felt like at the start of the game, and Jimmy Butler hadn't even scored a point during that time. The Hawks roared back with a huge run through the second and third quarter, and then Miami get the victory by a massive margin in overtime. So lots to talk about here from box score perspective. DeAndre Hunter, 40 minutes, a career high 28 points, 5 triples, 3 assists and a block. It took 65% shooting to get there, so we have to take a huge grain of salt, the 40 minutes and the high shooting. He's more of a 14-team league guy. Don't sway yourself too much with this performance. While Trae Young, really, really quiet to start the game, ended with 21, 4, and 9, so not a bad night when he was quiet overall. Again, an overtime game, and Jabari plays just 30 minutes. His value is not going to last, I don't believe, when John Collins returns. 16 and 7 with a 1-1, while Fanderpants Kevin Huerter, only 9 points. He had 9 points in the first half and then didn't score. 3 threes, But 7 assists, that is where his value is. If he's getting 5 assists a game, 4 assists a game, that makes him a 12-team league guy. And he was still on a minutes limit, didn't play the overtime period. So when we see him getting back to 30, 31 minutes, because he's considerably better than Cam Reddish, he's going to get these minutes. He is a 12-team league guy in my opinion. Vince Carter, red hot early, 12 points with 4 triples. Damian Jones, not the greatest night. Foul trouble limited him to just 13 minutes. He does have that value only if you're looking for field goal percentage and blocks, but this was obviously a horrible example of that. While DeAndre Bembry looks to have fallen out of favour, and I imagine when Herter's minutes jump back up to that 30 mark, we'll see even less from Bembry. For the Miami Heat, Bam Bam Adebayo.
Bam, 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 bam.
Now, I was talking about him as a real breakout guy this season. I didn't expect this. 30, 11, and 11. A triple-double. 72 from the field, 80 from the line, 2 steals. He is legitimately a chance for the All-Star game. That is how well he is playing. These numbers are fantastic. He is not a sell high. This is how good this bloke is. Unbelievable stuff. Dunky Robinson, what the hell? 34 points, in fact. 10 triples, 43 minutes, 4 assists, 1 block. He is not losing his rotation spot when everyone gets healthy. He will not do this all the time, but he has value in 14-team leagues at the very least. And for now, while Winslow and Dragic are out, you can use him in a 12-teamer. Kendrick Nunn had been shitful lately. Great here. 36, 6 and 4, 42 minutes. Took 26 shots, the most on the team. That's a wild number. Again, he is more likely to suffer a drop-off when Dragic and Winslow return, but yeah, he's going to have these occasional good games, and while these guys are out, he is a stream guy, while Tyler Hero wasn't. His night, 0 for 6. 0 points, 23 minutes. Real tough to consider him a must-hold. I cannot have it in me to say that he is a must-hold 12-team league guy. He's okay as a stream type guy while Winslow and Dragic are sideline, which is a phrase I reckon I've said at least 25,000 times this season. This is rough, real rough. Olynyk was rough also. His minutes, he's just so hard to predict. 17 minutes for Olynyk, while Derek Jones played 35 minutes. Kelly is really more solid as a 14-team league player who has 12-team value, but then there's always this sort of bullshit that does tend to happen with him, which ruins the overall party vibe of his value. And now, on to the last game of the night. You're never going to guess it. The Knicks played, and they got their asses kicked. 115-87 by the Portland Trailblazers in Portland. Let's talk about the Knicks, who are an abject disaster again. Now, it is hard for an interim coach coming in. Second game, it's hard to establish a rotational pattern, what he's doing with his lineup. So he is running with the same starting lineup that David Fizdale was running, the incorrect starting lineup, but still running with that lineup. He played pretty much every player in the rotation. So much uncertainty still with this team. Julius Randle had 15 and 7 in 26 minutes. Oh, fantastic. That's great. Awesome. Well done. We love you, Julius. It's completely underwhelming. Punch Bob had an 11 and 10 double-double in 20 minutes. Great. I don't care about that unless it's in deeper leagues. Mitchie Robinson.
And Mitch Robinson says, I'll take it from here.
Had some early fouls, but recovered to play 27 minutes. Had 14 and 5 with a block, 63% shooting. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. He is still a 12-team league guy. Lord Alfred Payton, who played decent minutes last game, played well, played 13 minutes here. So, I tweeted about this. Oh, he's on a minutes limit. People responded to, well, if he's on a minutes limit, why did he play fewer minutes in this game than what he did last game? That is a concerning sign. 2 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. Now, I think that Payton is the best fantasy point guard out of the trio of him, Frank Ntilikina, and Dennis Smith Jr. Whether he's the best real-life point guard or not remains to be seen. That bar is insanely low. He's also not any part of the future. He is like 26 years of age. The other two guys are 21 years of age. I think Ntilikina might only be 20 or he's just turned 21. They are still young. I fear it's going to be just a complete mishmash of rotation minutes between those guys all season. Again, the highest upside there is Payton. You don't want Frank in 12s or 14s or probably even 16-teamers. But I fear there's going to be so much confusion with this rotation with Payton getting these minutes. Marcus Morris, 25 minutes, 10 points. How long's the season been going? 6 weeks. I've been banging on about it. He will not be a standard league player by the time we hit fantasy playoffs. It is as straightforward as possible. It is going to happen, and you need to try and get value at any point to get back from there. The Fort Kevin Knox is trash. And I tell you who else is bad? RJ Barrett. 19 minutes, 5 points, 4 rebounds. 1 of 9 from the field. Hey, he hit his free throws. No defensive numbers, no assists. He is struggling in a big way. If I had to go back and redo my dynasty rankings, I wouldn't have him at number 3. I sort of had him there by default because I just did not like this draft class really at all. I feel like my thoughts on this draft class feel pretty accurate. I just don't think it's that good outside of the top two guys. Barrett's bad. In a roto league, I don't see how you can roster him. In a head-to-head league, it's pretty bloody rough. He's going to be hurting your percentages almost every night. And I think in a 10-team format, you'll find better value streaming his spot. He just isn't good. And I'm not actually sure he's ever going to be good. It's really early, of course. We've got to give these guys years and years. And they've got to have a decent team around them, which, of course, the Knicks don't. But he's bad at this point. You can't argue he is bad at this stage. If you're in a very deep league, Alonzo Trier, yes, he is better than Luka Doncic, but you should also be looking to add him. 13 points, 2 triples, and 3 assists. Now, I don't know how he gets minutes with guys like Dennis Smith playing those 14 minutes, Knox getting his nonsense 20 minutes, Dotson playing 23. It is still a real mess, but a sign of life is all you're looking for in a 20-teamer. So adding a guy like Trier there, who can score. I don't think he's a very good player, bad defender, horrible defender, in fact, really tunnel visioned as a passer. Gets points, but that can be useful in those deeper formats. Not anything shallower, of course. For the Blazers, Whiteside, a big game from him. He's hitting free throws. He's blocking shots. He had 17 and 15. The fantasy numbers are going to continue to be there for Whiteside. While Lillard had 31 points, 6 assists, and 8 triples and played only 29 minutes. This is what happens when you play the Knicks. That's what also makes the Anthony Simons line pretty interesting. 29 minutes for Simons, 16, 5, and 3 with 4 triples, but you're playing the Knicks. Terry Stotts did say something interesting pre-game, saying that Kent Bazemore is going to start today, but that might not be the case every game. Maybe they'll go with the Lillard, Simons, McCollum starting 1, 2, 3. That's pretty rough defensively, but maybe that can happen. The thing with Simons is, though, outside of scoring, he doesn't do much in those other categories. He's not a high rebounder. He's not a good assist guy. He's not a defensive stat guy. He's not an overly efficient player. So I'm not adding him in 12s. Even if they say, hey, Simons is starting, I don't think he's a 12-team must-add guy. He's one of those guys whose hype might actually exceed the fantasy production. But this was strong from him. Mallow, he continues to really hurt your field goals. 16 points on 39% shooting. 4 rebounds, 0 assists. He did have 2 steals and a block, so that's nice. He is still more of a fringy type 12-team league guy, while McCollum had 13, 4, and 3. Obviously not his best game. One of those guys we talk about all the time, that it's really sell highs and buy lows for him all the time. Bazemore, it was rough. 4 points in 22 minutes. When we talked about the Hood injury, Bazemore was that ad that you could look at for defensive stats if you needed it. Not a must-add in every situation. A must-look-at type player where you got to see, does this fit? But 22 minutes, yes, the blowout did harm that. But the fact that he might not even start every game and he's not going to be a high offensive type player, you need to really assess whether that makes sense on your team or not. We had 21 minutes from Skal Labissiere. He played alongside Whiteside in what was really nothing more than a glorified practice run from the Blazers as they went through and destroyed the New York Knicks. Let's have a look now at some injury news. Otto Porter going to be reevaluated again in 4 weeks. The Bulls, who said it was a soft tissue injury and then said it was a bone bruise, have now said it's a fracture. Either they have the worst medical imaging equipment in the world, their doctors are Nick Riviera from The Simpsons, or they are blatant asshole liars. I don't know which one of those. Maybe it's a combination of all three, but it is consistently a confusing thing. I think with Porter, you can drop him. He was already on a minutes limit to begin the season, and now he's had this soft tissue, bone bruise, fractured foot problem. I'm not sure how much we see of Porter this season. I think he's a drop in 10s and 12-team leagues. Brandon Clark is going to be a surprise return for Wednesday's action with his oblique issue. He'd really fallen off a little bit before the injury. More of a 14-team guy, maybe a 12-teamer at this point. And Avery Bradley also set to return for the Lakers. Of course, he's not a 12 or a 14-team league guy. The Italian cock, Danilo Gallinari.
Hands off my cock!
He's ready to go for Wednesday, as is Marvin Bagley. Of course, if Bagley is on your waiver wire, you go and add him. I don't know what they're going to do with the rotation in terms of minutes for Bagley and Nemanja Bjelica. I think we'll get Bjelica, we'll get Bagley, we'll get Holmes as the 3 big men. I think you probably get a little bit of a cut down in someone like Ariza's minutes as well, who is playing some backup 4. But Bagley, of course, is a must-roster 12-team league player now that he is back in action. And then we had Nick Batum with some hand discomfort. He's only like the deepest of deep league players at the moment. And then Jamal Murray in what was, it's always humorous to see an injury designated as a trunk injury, because it makes me think either it's an elephant or it's either he's an elephant, or B, he got hit on the dick. And neither of those things are true, but he got hit in the back by Ben Simmons with a knee. X-rays were negative. Hopefully he doesn't miss too much time. Monty Morris struggled a little bit in his role with Murray out, but he would be a short-term 14, maybe even back-end 12-team league ad. Probably is a 12-team ad if Murray misses time, but that is not guaranteed at this point. Let's flip it over now. We're looking at a monster Wednesday, 11 games in the NBA. We're looking at FanDuel pricing here as well. All right, that first game for Wednesday, a big Wednesday, of course, 11 games, is the Lakers taking on the Orlando Magic in Orlando. The Lakers are 6.5-point favorites on the road, and the total here is 213 points. Rajon Rondo is questionable with that hammy issue that kept him out of last game, while Tone Davis and Kyle Kuzma, they always pop up on the injury report as probable. I don't think we need to worry too much about them. Of course, the chief, Al-Farouq Aminu, is out for the Magic, as is Nikola Vucevic. At point guard in this one, now this game overall, these are two teams with one with a really good defense, the other with a really good defense. Not a great situation for DFS. Markelle Fultz, point guard, 6,300. The matchup probably scares me a little bit away here from Fultz. He's been in that high 20s mark most of the time, which is not bad. 63 is maybe a little bit too high, while Carter Williams, of course, is not someone we care about, nor is DJ Augustin. Although in saying that, DJ's at 5,000. He's giving 25 a night. If he plays 25 minutes, I think he can be around that mark. But again, there's a lot better options on the slate. If Rondo does happen to be out, Alex Caruso at sub 4,000, he has a real chance to play upwards of 25 minutes, and that could give him the ability to get 22, 23 points. Last game, he had 33 points in 30 minutes. So there is some value in him in this spot. At shooting guard, Fournier is at 6,400. I think he's got a really strong floor value. He is taking a lot of shots. He's getting a lot of minutes. He's a 30-plus point guy most nights. Now, the defense is the worry here. But we do have to at least acknowledge that he is an option for the Lakers. They are welcoming back Avery Bradley as well. He is going to be on a 20-minute limit, but he is coming back into the lineup. At shooting guard, we're not using him. We're not using Danny Green. And, of course, because Bradley is back, that takes a lot of the value, if there was any, from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Terry Ross is at 5,300. I like what Ross is doing. He is taking on the usage bump with Vucevic out as well, so he is worth a look. More for tournaments, but there is some cash game value for Ross. Johnny Isaac's at 6,700. I feel like that price is too high, and the matchup here is not an ideal one. Now, Isaac got it done last game with a lot of blocks, but that's hard to rely upon consistently with 5 blocks like he got last game. While LeBron James, he's at 10.9, and while the upside maybe isn't necessarily there with James, a 50-point floor is always something that's worthwhile looking into. At power forward, Kem Birch is at 4,400. He is the starting center. He is not of any interest to me, especially in this matchup. While Aaron Gordon at 64, this bloke just continues to underperform, and I don't like that price tag. Of course, I don't like Kyle Kuzma's value here either. Tone Davis is all the way down at 11,800. He's giving us 57 a night. No one's really going to be able to stop him on the Magic, so he is absolutely worth a look. Now, that is a $1,000 price rise, which is not an ideal spot, but still looking pretty interesting. Dwight, JaVale, Mo Bamba, I don't really think any of those guys are moving the needle for me from a DFS point of view in this game. Let's move on to the second game. We've got the Clippers and the Toronto Raptors. Kawhi Leonard goes back to Toronto.
I'm a fun guy.
He goes back to receive his ring. Fred VanVleet for Toronto is questionable. JaMychal Green is doubtful for the Clippers, while Landry Shamet and Scooter Magruder have already been ruled out. At point guard, Lowry's at $8,000. Now, like the first game, this is a matchup with two really good defenses as well, which takes a lot of the peripheral DFS value away. I think Lowry at 8,000 would be interesting if VanVleet is out. He's been struggling a little bit, though, with the shot. Not obviously my best option on the board. Patty Beverly at 55 tends to thrive more when either Paul George or Kawhi are out. They are both in here, so that's not of interest. Jerome Robinson, no thank you. At shooting guard, Lou Williams at 6,000. He is really off at the moment, averaging under 20 over the last 3 games. This matchup is a good one, and he plays well against Toronto in the past. Only for tournaments would I want to use him with both Kawhi and Paul George in. Norm Powell would be interesting enough if VanVleet is out. He's at 5,600. He dropped 30 last game. The matchup's bad, and I don't feel super strong in Powell's floor, but at least he gets some value if Fred does happen to sit. Via small forwards, Pascal Siakam at 8,700. I like Pascal here in this one. I think he's a 40-plus point type of a player, while George at 9,300. I don't mind Paul at 9,300. I think there are better ways to spend that money, and not one of those ways is not on Paul George. Mo Harkless is at 4,200. Last couple of games have been interesting from Harkless, with Green out, with Magruder out, with Shamet out. There is a chance he gets more minutes, but he really just doesn't move the needle for me, while the Jedi, OG Anunoby.
Hello there.
I think if we do have Van Vliet out, we should be looking at Anunoby as an option. The minutes will push up. That means less minutes for Powell to battle with him at that small forward spot, and his ability to bring defensive numbers can get him over the line. That's the only situation I'd like to use him. And then at power forward, Kawhi Leonard, the fun guy, 9,600. I like him in this one. I like the ability for him to get close to 50. This is a good spot for Kawhi, while Ibaka at 54 is not one I'm keen on. And then we go on to the centers. You've got Marc Gasol at 5,600.
Oh, hi, Mark.
He put up a really big line last time, 44 points. I don't trust it, but center is one position that you can attack against the Clippers. They have Montrezl Harrell, obviously not a great defender. Just Gasol's inability to hit a 2-point shot or even take shots at this point is a hindrance, and at 56, I just think there are better ways out there to spend that money. 7,400 from Montrezl Harrell against Gasol is a bad spot, while Zubats at 44 was really, really strong last game, but again, the Gasol situation is obviously not ideal at all to go up against. Next game we look at is the Rockets and the Cavs. At least it's not two good defenses going up against each other. Here in this one, we have the Rockets favored by 11. That is the real concern, is that the Cavs have been absolute arse cheeks over the last couple of games, and the Rockets could really spank them. The total here is 228.5, which of course is interesting in itself, but is that enough to get value happening? Garland's at 41. He just doesn't do it for me. And the matchup, point guards have been really restricted against the Rockets, while Westbrook's at 10-4. Now, Russ is putting up some big numbers at the moment. He's averaging 56 over his last three. But, of course, this concern with going up against Cleveland and the blowout nature is a worry. But the Rockets don't tend to limit their guys all that much. So I guess that gives you an element of safety in using Westbrook in what is one of the best matchups in the league to go up against. So I think we should have some value in using Westbrook here. Same with Harden. He's at 12-2. That blowout risk is important to note, but I don't think that it's completely disqualifying to use Harden in a lineup. Jordy Clarkson's at 45. Really, really hard to trust him, while Benny McLemore at 5,000. He is giving us numbers. Austin Rivers is out again, so McLemore should get those opportunities. I think at $5,000, he should be an option for you here to drop in 26, 27 points pretty comfortably. I do like him. At small forward, Danny House is at 48. I'm not overly keen. I think he's a better categories league guy than a DFS points league type player. While Chetty Osman is doing absolutely nothing. Kevin Porter Jr. at 4,000 looked pretty good last game. I'm not really thinking that he is a DFS option at this point. There are going to be better guys out there. Love's at 7,400. I don't think we can have any trust in Kevin Love at this point. Gary Clark, the Comet at 36. No thank you for him. PJ Tucker is giving us value in weird-ass ways. He had 19 rebounds last game. He has big steal numbers, all these weird shooting nights. But the price is 5,600 for PJ, and I'm not certain that's a great option. The Muppet John Henson, Larry Nance, really hard to get excited about those blokes. At center, Clint Capella's at 8,800. Centers against the Cavs is always a really good spot to go up against. He has been a little bit underwhelming the last couple of games, but this is an opportunity in a really good matchup for him to completely dominate. I do like him. I like him more than Tristan Thompson.
Giggity.
Who's at 6,900. I would take Capella there, but again, that blowout risk is real for everybody involved in this game. Next up, we look at the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are 1.5-point favorites at home. The total is very, very low, 209.5, the lowest total of the day. Marcus Smart is questionable. He missed the last game with an eye infection. Gordon Hayward, of course, is back. We don't have any word on whether Hayward is dealing with any sort of minutes restriction. I don't imagine if he is, it's going to be a really tight one, because it was only a hand injury that kept him out, not any lower body situation. At point guard, at 8,000, Malcolm Brogdon. Probably a little bit too high given the nature of the matchup and the Celtics and the low total and the defense. I think we'd end up fading a lot of guys in this one. Kemba at 77 is a much preferable spot to use than Brogdon. Yeah, $300 cheaper, probably a bit more consistent as well. TJ McConnell, Aaron Holiday, Brady Wanamaker, no thanks. At shooting guard, Jeremy Lamb, he struggled the last couple. 6,100 I think is a little bit too high for Lammy. While Marcus Smart at 51, I'd fade off on that as well. At small forward, Tony Warren Jr. is at 5,200. Even last game, he wasn't good, and he almost got to that number. I think he, out of anyone in this game, is one of the better guys to have a look at here. While Gordo Hayward's at 65, he's a GPP guy to me. While Jaylen Brown at 67. You actually have to like what Brown is doing. He is giving us 33 a night over the last 5. Is that quite there at 6,700? It's pretty much on the nose of where you want it to be. There is some concern with the level of defense here. The Pacers defending that position can be quite stringent, so that gives you an element of pause against using Jalen, but I think he's still in play. At power forward, Sabonis is all the way up at $9,000. Now, that is obviously high, but this guy is putting up 45 a night. I like him in this one too. Tice at 43, not all that keen on, while Tatum's at $8,000, and he is giving us 46 a night. So I think there is value in Tatum as well, they are really ramping up the numbers. Again, the Brown and Tatum recent production numbers, some of it we have to factor in that Hayward was out, so that's going to have an impact, but I still think that they can be used. At centre, Miles Turner, I wouldn't want to trust anything to him at this point, while Enes Kanter and Vincent Poirier for the Boston Celtics, not guys that I'm really all that interested in. Poirier should get in the mix with Robbie Williams, the Rock DJ, out with that hip injury that's bothering him. The next game is the Charlotte Hornets on a back-to-back, taking on the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are 9.5-point favourites, and the total here is 217.5. Iman Shumpert is doubtful with knee issues, while for Charlotte, Nick Batum left Tuesday's game with hand discomfort, and Marvin Williams has missed the last 2 games with knee soreness. We don't know their status. If they miss, it's Bacon and Kid Gilchrist who get the bumps there. It also helps guys like Paul Washington Jr. and Miles Bridges. At point guard, Dinwiddie's at 8,000. No Kyrie Irving again. It's been amazing that the Nets' schedule has included 14 consecutive games against the Celtics in Boston for Kyrie not to play in those games. But hey, that's just the way the vagaries of the schedule tend to work, I guess. But he is out again. He has Spencer Dinwiddie's at 8,000. His numbers have been a little bit down the last couple of Spence, but I like him against a back-to-back team that's terrible. He should be close to that 40 mark, so he's in play. Rozier's at 7,300. I also like him here. I'm not sure his upside is all that high, but there is enough value in using Rozier with how he's been accumulating numbers. And then at shooting guard, Garrett Temple, 5,500. Look, he is a low upside type of guy, but he's been relatively consistent and relatively strong for a cash game sort of a guy. So I don't dislike him here with Karis LeVert out. David Nwaba, Devonte Graham, Theo Pinson. Now, Graham at 77, they're your other shooting guards. He is putting up monster numbers. Really hard to ignore what Devonte Graham is doing at this point, and I think we have to use him at that sort of a salary despite it being a back-to-back. At small forward, Jana Moose is a minimum salary player with Shumpert out, LeVert out. Obviously, there is a chance for Musa to get more minutes. I'm not suggesting we do anything more with Musa than look at him as a GPP type of a guy, but I think we have to at least consider him in that area at that minimum salary with that extra opportunity. Taurean Prince at 63, I think, comes in pretty good, as does Smoke and Joe Harris at 55. Value for both of those guys in a really strong matchup. Miles Bridges at 51. Bridges had 28 in 38 today, which is strong at 5,100. If we do hear that Williams and Batum are out, I think we look at Bridges as a relatively safe floor cash guy. At power forward, of course, your starting power forward, Jarrett Allen, who's doing these positions over at FanDuel. 7,600 for Allen. Centers against the Hornets, it's generally a pretty good time of it for those guys. Allen is putting up strong numbers at the moment. Now, that is a really high price, and that's the risk, because if he gets into foul trouble, if they decide to run with DeAndre Jordan, you just get dicked, and that's really hard to get back from at that sort of a salary. So he is a little bit tougher to use, in my opinion, while Paul Washington Jr. at 6,000, not putting up the huge DFS lines. I think we can go other directions. At centre, Jordan's at 54. Maybe we look at him as a GPP guy, low enough price, great matchup, opportunity there for him. Bismack Biyombo's at 39. Biyombo dropped in 31 today in 24 minutes. And I think at that price, I think we can at least look at him to break even from a cash play, which is all you really want. While Cody Zeller also had a pretty strong one today, but at 4,700, I'll take the bloke that cost me $800 less in Biyombo, who can provide maybe equivalent type value, which is what we've seen from him over the last couple of games. The next game is the Atlanta Hawks, another team on a back-to-back, taking on the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are 5-point favorites here for against the Hawks. The Bulls, I don't know what to make of them, honestly. Otto Porter, the news coming out with him is not great. Every single player on the Bulls roster has popped up as probable because their mate, your absolute mate, Jim Boylan, came out and said that Zach LaVine was dealing with injuries, but not enough to put him on the injury report. So the Bulls, I am convinced the league said, Jim, you can't come out and say blokes are injured, but we're not putting them on the injury report. So literally, Daniel Gafford, Denzel Valentine, Ryan Archer-Jacquino, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, and Wendell Carter all appeared on the injury report as probable for Chicago. That absolutely has to be in retort for Boylan coming out and saying that sort of nonsense. So, I imagine we get Chris Dunn starting again with Otto Porter sideline and Chandler Hutchison out. Dunn is at 5,700. That's too high for a bloke that really isn't that good, and occasionally he can have a big game. More often than not, he doesn't have a big game. So he's not a super guy to look at, maybe a tournament guy. Kobe White is just really, really hard to get any sort of level of trust in. He's like a 1 in 10 type of player. Win 1 game out of 10 is a good one, and that's not what you want for DFS. Well, Satoransky at 6,000. Got back on track last game. A really good matchup in terms of going up against someone like Trae Young. 6,000 is a high price, and I think we can do better. While Young at 9,600, a little bit slow against Miami, especially in the first half, but against this Bulls team, there is some value, but the Bulls have defended point guards pretty well this season. I still think Young at 96 always has to be in your plans. Shooting guard, Fanderpants Kevin Huerter. No word on if he's resting in a back-to-back. I don't imagine he will. I like him at that $4,400 price point. While Levine at 82, I think there is value in him being able to get that against a Hawks team on a back-to-back with a bad defense. So I do like Zach here. Bembry, Crab, no thanks. Small forward, the Hammer. Denzel Valentine, 3,600. He's in the rotation. He's hitting threes. He's not really doing DFS stuff for us, though. While DeAndre Hunter looked pretty good on Tuesday at 5,100, I think we can get at least a solid enough cash floor for DeAndre here. DeAndre Hunter, that is. Cam Reddish, no thank you. For the big man, Jabari's at 6,300. I think, again, the matchup is okay for Jabari. He's got the opportunity here against Chicago. I'm not super into him, more for tournaments, while Thad Young is a strong no. While Larry Markkinen at 64. Well, this is another matchup where he can get going. Lowry put up some big games against the Hawks last season. I like him as a tournament play here after last game's struggle a little bit. Damo Jones at 52. Look, it's a great matchup. Centers have really put up good numbers against the Bulls, but I'm not really interested in him as a massive upside player. Maybe a floor guy, but yeah, it's only because of the matchup that suits him. While Wendell Carter Jr. at 6,900.
Giggity.
I think that's just too high for Carter at this point with what level of production he is putting out there for us. All right, the next game we look at is the Utah Jazz, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Mike Conley is out again. The Jazz are favored by 1 point on the road. The total is 222.5. The Jazz are struggling. The Wolves are struggling. Somebody has to get a win. I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody has to. Jake Layman is out, but Jeff Teague has popped up on the injury report with an ankle injury. If Teague is out, Shabazz Napier is going to get a boost. You're going to get Jarrett Culver getting some more minutes there as well. At point guard, Moutier's at 3,500. I have as little interest in that as I could possibly have. While Teague at 53. Look, if Teague plays at 53, he should be able to smash through that number. He's averaging 31 over the last 3 games, but there is that risk that he doesn't play, of course. While Napier at minimum salary is an interesting tournament guy on FanDuel because you might not get the news on Teague until after lock, and if he's in your lineup in one of your tournaments, he could actually blow up for 25, 26 points pretty comfortably. At shooting guard, Don Mitchell, 8,100.
Is Don is good.
No Conley out there. He is really struggling at the moment. Mitchell, I think this is a great... I know this is a great opportunity for him to turn it around, so I'm ready to go back and bank on him. While Andy Wiggins at 77 also feels like a relatively safe cash play type of a guy in this one. At small forward, Bojan's at 6,300. Bojan Bogdanovic. The numbers for him recently have been pretty poor, averaging under 22 points in his last 5 games. But that's with some really poor shooting. If that turns around in a really strong matchup, that can help him. So he's a really excellent GPP guy. Josh Okogie at 43 is doing very, very little. While Jingle and Joe at 5,000, he is playing so well alongside Gobert with Conley out, and that's the situation we're going to have again. So Ingles at 5,000 is a guy we look at. Jarrett Culver's at 49. I'd really only consider Culver a GPP guy in the case that Teague is out. And then we look at, you got a guy like Napier where you can spend $1,400 less and he might actually outproduce him. So that's probably the direction I would go. While Bates Diop is getting the minutes, he's not really doing much from a DFS point of view. At power forward, Bob Covington's at 5,700. He's doing absolutely nothing, and I think we'll steer clear of him. Jeff Green, Ed Davis, Jordan Bell, George Niang, no. At centre, Rudy Gobert's at 8,000. A strong floor from Gobert. I'm really happy with his floor. I'm not sure his upside's all there, but it is a strong floor number at 8,000, while Towns is at 11,100. The matchup against Gobert in the past has bothered Towns. I think if we're going to fade off him, this is probably the time to do it. And Gorgie Jeng, well, we're not on him to even begin with to fade off. Next up, we've got the Memphis Grizzlies, the Phoenix Suns. The Suns are 7-point favourites at home. The total is 231.5. Aaron Baines is probable with that calf issue that had kept him out, but he did return last game. McCall Bridges always seems to appear on the injury report, as does Cam Johnson. And Brandon Clark has been upgraded to probable for the Grizzlies, so that's an interesting development, as has Kyle Anderson. At point guard, Ravishing Rick Rubio's at $8,000. He is carving teams up at the moment, just getting assists left, right, and center, averaging 40 over the last 5. The matchups are really strong one for Rubio. Hard to see why I wouldn't want to look at him here, while Ja Morant's at 79. Now, Morant dropped 40 in his first game back in only 29 minutes. I think Morant, we can look at least a high 30s points guy with 45 to 50 point upside. I do like him quite a bit in this one. Tyus Jones, D'Anthony Melton, their value has dropped down considerably. Devin Booker's at 8,700. Recently, the production has gone way up for him. It's a great matchup for Book. I think we're looking at 45-ish type points for Booker in this one, so he does work for me. Dylan Brooks at 56 is impossible to really pay attention to. In cash, for tournaments, he's got the upside, but he's so inconsistent. And then you've got Kyle Anderson, Ty Jerome, Marko Guduric, who I don't think we need to care about all that much. At small forward, Cam Johnson's at 43. No, thank you. Kelly Oubre's at 72. Oubre has been wildly inconsistent as well, but I do think that he can be used in this one, while Jay Crowder at 5,000 is not getting anything happening. At power forward, Brandon Clark's at 5,000. Don't want to use him, but with him back, that does put an impact in on Jonas Valanciunas' upside. Dario Saric is at 57. Yep. Been okay. I'm not sure I like the upside for Saric, and he can have a bit of a shaky floor, but for now, while Ayton is out, at least you can get some marginal cash value. Triple J's at 7,300. That is too high with Clark back, in my opinion, while Frank the Tank at 45, also too high with Baines returning. Bainesy's at 54. He dropped 20 points in 15 minutes in his first game back. We don't know what the level of minutes restriction is going to be in this game, so that is somewhat of a level of concern. I don't think we'd want to get involved with him, and Valanciunas is all the way up at 8,500. That is too high, with the return of Clark potentially impacting his overall minutes in this game. Next game, we have got the New Orleans Pelicans, the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks are 13-point favorites. The total is 234 points. Derek Favors is questionable. We've heard that multiple times over the last 2 weeks. We don't know if he's going to play. If he is out, Jackson Hayes, Jolly Okafor, they get the boost. But even then, there's no real reliability in those players. We don't know if Lonzo Ball is going to remain on the bench. My guess would be yes, he does, but he still played 30 minutes last game. Whereas for Milwaukee, this looks really like one of those games where Giannis plays 27 minutes and Middleton plays 25 and Bledsoe plays 24 minutes and Lopez plays 23 because they kick the ass of the Pelicans. At point guard, Lonzo is at 6,000. Now, amazingly, Lonzo's last 3 games against the Bucks, and I don't even know if it was 3 games, but 69 points in 39 minutes he's averaged. That seems insane. Only for tournaments for Lonzo, and even then not interested. I can't really get behind using any of these Bucks guys, given how Budenholzer uses his rotation. Especially on games where they do get big leads, and I cannot imagine this Pelicans team challenging them here. Drew's at 7,900. He has been rock solid from a cash perspective. No reason to think he's going to be that far off here. While Redick at 43 is a massive drop, and that at least brings him into attention. $8,000 for JJ. That gives him some GPP value. Matthews, Hart, Connaughton, Korver, Alexander Walker. I don't really like any of those blokes here. Middleton's at 68, and the worry here is just the blowout could limit him. Yanni's at 12,000. Again, I don't want to trust that. He could be like a 48-point guy, which is strong, but at 12,000, it's nowhere near enough. Kenny Williams, no thank you. While Ingram at 88, I think that's too high for Ingram. We love what he's doing, but he's only averaging 36 over the last 5 in 34 minutes, and that's not enough at 8,800, not even close to enough. For your power forwards, Favors is at 66. No way I'm using him first game back. Ilyasova, no thanks. And then at center, Lopez at 52. I don't think we can trust him at all, given the potential for the low minutes in this one, and his brother, no thank you. Jackson Hayes at 5,000. I think he is absolutely worth looking at if Favors is out. Some really, really good numbers for him coming most likely if Derek does happen to miss. The next game on the slate, the Thunder and the Kings. No spread out at this point. Marvin Bagley is likely to return to the lineup. He is probable, as is Corey Joseph, as is Bogdan Bogdanovic. The Italian cock, Danilo Gallinari.
Hands off my cock!
He is ready to go. He'll be back playing for the Thunder while Terry Ferguson is out again, so I imagine Abdul Nadir steps into that spot. Once more at point guard, Chris Paul's at 7,500. Paul is averaging 42.5 points over the last 3. That's plenty at 7,500, so I like Chris Paul here. Corey Joseph at 49, massive last time out. Hard to trust him, though, given his history of production. And then shooting guard, Gilgeous-Alexander all the way up to 72. And Shea hasn't been hitting his shots, but he's averaging 38 over the last 3. I think we look at him more as a tournament guy. Bogdanovic at 45 is only for tournaments, but the only reason I'm interested in Bogdanovic here is because his salary has dropped by $1,200. He has not been good, but that is the only reason. And it's only for tournament. Schroeder at 6,000. I feel good about his floor. Limited value in his upside, but I do like his floor value here. While Hield's at 7,500. Similarly, I'm not sure the upside's there, but with the injuries and the absence of Fox, his floor value is pretty strong. We've got Lugens Dort, and people just want to hear me play this.
Bort? Oh, come on, Bort?
Mommy, buy me a license plate!
No, come along, Bort.
Are you talking to me?
No, my son is also named Bort.
Tony Snell tweeted at me and said he was proud of Lugens Dort putting up 9 fantasy points in 29 minutes. So that is how much you need to pay attention to Dort. So I just wanted to play that sound. At small forward, the Roosters at 6,400. Probably a little bit too high for Gallinari. And power forwards actually have been really limited against Sacramento this season. Nadir's at 39. He had 24 points in 28 minutes last game. Worth at least consideration in a tournament. While the pencil, Harrison Barnes. Barnesy. I think Bagley returning does have an impact on Barnes, so I'd leave him away. Trevor Ariza is putting up good numbers. I don't get it, but he is putting up good numbers. I wouldn't want to use him here, while Darius Bazley will move back to the bench after starting last game for Gallinari. Marvin Bagley's at 7,000. Really not interested in using him first game back. Nerlens Noel at 47. No thanks. While Rashawn Holmes at 7,600. Holmes has been crushing it, averaging 41 over the last 5. Great matchup for Holmes. I'm okay using him here, despite the concerns that so many seem to have with Bagley. Maybe that will be founded or unfounded. I'm still okay with using Holmes at that price. While Bjelica at 68, he's been putting up huge numbers as well, but he is a guy that's going to cop quite a bit of a hit with Bagley back. Steve Adams at 71, he's blocking shots, he's getting assists, he's hitting free throws. I do not know who this bloke is, but the numbers are really, really good. 40 points over the last 5 for him. Now, opposition centers have had some struggles against the Kings. At 7,100 for Adams, he's at least an option, but he has been relatively inconsistent over the course of the season. So it's not one that I'm super into just looking at and locking and loading as a must-roster guy. Then the last game of the night, the Knicks and the Warriors in Golden State. The Knicks are on a back-to-back after playing in Portland on Tuesday. The Warriors are 5-point favourites. That's how bad the Knicks have been going, that the Warriors are favourite. The total, 210.5 points. The triangle, Eric Paschall is questionable, while Damian Lee is looking to return for the Warriors. Whether he fits in the rotation remains to be seen. At point guard, Lord Alfred Payton at 51. Now, the Knicks are going still with Frank Ntilikina at point guard. We'll see if that changes after Tuesday's game. Payton at 51 is more of a GPP guy than anything, because those minutes can be quite unpredictable. Ntilikina and Smith, I wouldn't want to use them, nor would I care about the lubricant Kai Bowman. 8,500 for D'Angelo Russell. Point guard is one of those spots that opposition, or the Knicks, can actually defend pretty well with Ntilikina out there. So I do think that D'Angelo at that price is absolutely worth looking at, but not a lock. While Rowan Barrett Jr. at 6,400, probably a little bit too expensive for him. At your small forward position, you've got Marcus Morris at 6,000. Strong cash, no tournament value. Well, Glennie Robinson is the opposite, no cash value, but some tournament upside there at least. And then you got guys like Alec Burks, who's actually been really, really good, averaging 33 over the last 3. But that salary at 6,400 is just too expensive for my tastes. At power forward, Draymond's at 7,000. He actually dropped 35 points last game. It's a good matchup for Dre. I think that they might actually have to push him a little bit here to get a victory in a winnable game, so that will work in his favour. I'm not locking him in, but at least he's in play. While the triangle's at 5,900, Eric Paschall, averaging just 25 over the last 5. It's a good matchup for him, but I'm not super excited about him. While Randall at 72, this is a good spot for Randall, I think. And then for your centres, Cauley Stein's at 52. The numbers for him recently have been pretty strong, so I'm okay looking at him as an option, while Mitchie Robinson's at 7,300.
And Mitch Robinson says, I'll take it from here.
It's probably a little bit too high for Robinson, maybe for tournaments, but you wouldn't want to trust that in cash with the history of foul issues that he has had. Let's flip it over now and look at some DraftKings options. Osman, I think, down at 3,300 at least gives you some GPP upside. I think Denzel Valentine, the hammer at 32, is okay there. Mitchell, DeAndre Hunter, DeAndre Jordan look okay. Bagley at 61 is way more in play on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel. Draymond at 58 also looks pretty good. Kawhi, D'Angelo, Bojan Bogdanovic, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Miles Turner, Jarrett Allen look okay. Sabonis, Haywood, Towns, Siakam, and Gilgeous-Alexander also come in looking pretty good over on DraftKings. That'll do it for me today, guys. Don't forget, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Jaylen Brown.